We are going to start off with some introductions, or excuse me, we're going to start off with the agenda first. And the first agenda item is introductions, which we'll get to in a minute. But we are going to start off with a couple different things too. COVID-19 and the urgent call to action. Anyone who's attending this webinar is probably not surprised that e-commerce is growing exponentially right now, largely due to the pandemic, and those trends are not going to go away. We're going to talk about what that means from a channel conflict and mitigation perspective, talk about empowering selling channels with digital, and managing e-commerce when you now have new concerns with channel conflict, selling direct, other opportunities. And then we're going to wrap up with the role of marketplaces in Amazon, and we're going to go over a couple of key takeaways, answer any questions. And so with that, let's start with our introductions. Brian, do you want to take over here?
Sure thing, Tom. Can you hear me okay?
You bet.
Well, first and foremost, hope everyone is staying safe and healthy in this crazy 2020 year we have here. My name is Brian Beck. I'm the author of a book called $1 Billion B2B E-commerce. I also do advisory work for companies. And I'm also the managing partner of a company called Insiba that is sponsoring or co-presenting today. We are an Amazon business, B2B focused Amazon consulting firm. I've been around this industry a long time. It just makes me old. 20 years, in fact, and everywhere I've been, I've sort of run e-commerce and also dealt with this issue of channel conflict, which frankly it's a big issue, guys. It's one that has prevented a lot of companies from taking action on e-commerce, and we'll talk a little more about that in a moment. But I've been around the block a few times and have made a lot of mistakes, but also fortunately had some success. So I'm excited to share some of those things with you today. Justin, you want to say hello?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Can you guys hear me good?
Sure can.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Racine. I'm a commerce consultant with Proficient. Proficient is a digital consulting agency and transformation organization that works with some of the largest brands out there to help through navigating things like project roadmaps and re-implementing software. So my role within Proficient is really to work with our clients to really kind of help them along that journey. A little bit about myself. I've spent the last 10 years in e-commerce one way or another, primarily in healthcare distribution and manufacturing. So definitely well-versed for this conversation today, and held some different roles with Invacare, Cardinal, and Geriatric Medical, which we'll talk a little bit about later with some different use cases, which I think will be super interesting to this conversation. So Tom, thanks for having me, and looking forward to speaking with you along as Brian as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Justin. My name is Tom Florell. I'm the VP of Marketing at Znode. I've also been in e-commerce for a long time, primarily on the consulting side, spending 10 plus years in e-commerce and digital marketing. And I tend to focus on the integration of branding, marketing, and digital commerce. My role at Znode is really to run marketing and sales and leverage that past experience. And a quick introduction to Znode. Znode is an enterprise e-commerce platform that really can do a lot of things because of the multi-store capability built into the platform. So B2B, B2C, and then multi-tier e-commerce like B2B to X, which we'll get into in a few minutes here as well. And so with that,
not keyboard shortcuts, Tom. Yep. Well, guys, thank you so much again for the opportunity to talk to you, and Tom and Justin. I'm excited about our conversation today. And those of you who've heard me present before, have heard me talk about COVID-19, and I just wanted to quickly go through some of this because, again, this is just so important what's happening in our industry right now. Loyalty with COVID-19, loyalty is really dead. 50% of customers are buying products from places they've never bought products from before online. E-commerce penetration has doubled in this country. We've got 30% of buyers that are still going to be working from home at the end of next year. We've got traditional resellers that may not survive this event. Certainly, we see that in the retail environment where a lot of retailers have declared bankruptcy, some have gone out of business. And ultimately, though, this is changing the buyer behavior. It's redefining the buyer. And their needs now are more important than your legacy channel conflict concerns. In the past, I've walked, and I still walk into I don't walk. I talk to them like this with companies that say, "Gosh, we can't engage in digital commerce, e-commerce, because We're worried about what the channel will think, and they're going to completely drop our, buying from our business. So we've got to understand that, but move beyond it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Go ahead, Tom, to the next slide. So COVID is accelerating, guys, what's already happening, right? So, what many people don't realize is that millennials are going to be 75% of the workforce within just a couple of years. And these folks are going to be moving into procurement roles. Millennials make 60% of their purchases online. That's up from 47% last year. And they're making a lot of these purchases from Amazon. In fact, 97% use Amazon for at least part of their online shopping. And I'm going to talk later about how to use Amazon as a part of an overall approach to the market and how to manage channel conflict on Amazon. But suffice it to say, for the purposes of our discussion today, these folks are becoming the majority of your buyers, right? And a lot of companies don't realize it. They're still stuck in this. Gosh, I need to bring coffee and donuts to the the distributors or my resellers' offices and sell that way. Well, these folks don't want coffee or donuts, and don't ask them to fax anything. So anyway, let's go ahead to the next slide, Tom. The other misnomer I always hear, this is some great data, just came out recently, like I think 4 weeks ago from McKinsey. A lot of companies I talk to will say, well, I'm only going to sell my parts or my $2 items online. Well, guess what? B2B buyers, since the pandemic started, and even before that, but it again accelerated this, they're buying big. 15% of post-COVID B2B buyers are willing to spend over $1 million via digital channels without any human in-person interaction. $1 million. Now, okay, this sounds like fantasy land. I can tell you, I have clients where this is happening today. One of the companies I work with is a manufacturer of medical equipment, and they're selling $3, $4, $5 million shopping carts with advanced medical equipment online. This is now the sales team plays a role in some of this, but ultimately this is transacted online. So guys, this is a misnomer. These buyers are buying big. They're not just buying small items. Let's keep going. So the customer is in charge these days. This is a chart that I often use. It shows how complex the traditional buying process has now become. It's highly digitized, right? So traditionally, you'd have 3 steps here. You'd have the product manufacturer, you'd have a distributor in the middle, and you'd have a buyer at the end, an end user, a consumer or business buyer, right? Well, today you've got buyers, manufacturers selling direct. You've got distributors that are online and offline. You've got pure play resellers of product. You've got marketplaces like Amazon Business and vertical marketplaces across chemicals and aerospace and all different types of industries. The fact of the matter is that buyer end user has more power than they've ever had. And if you want a precedent for this, but you can read my book, Chapter 1. It talks about the retail marketplace. But guys, I mean, the precedent is, look at the department stores in the retail market. They're getting decimated. Big box retailers, some of them are doing well, but a lot of the traditional department stores that differentiated based on price and selection are being outcompeted. And it's really because the consumer's buyer behavior has changed. That's here. It's not coming. It's here for B2B, and we need to pay attention to it. And I say, listen to this guy, right? So next slide, Tom. Listen to this man. If anyone knows who he is, I love using this quote because I think it really says it all. This is Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon. The name's pronounced Bezos, not Bezos, by the way. He said this in 2010, and he was referring largely to the consumer market. Let me read it to you real quick. The balance of power is shifting towards buyers and away from companies. The right way to respond to this, if you are a company, that's most of you or all of you probably, is to put your vast amount of your energy, attention, and dollars into building a great product or service, and put a smaller amount into shouting about it or marketing it. What is he saying? He's saying that the consumer has more power and they have more choice, they have more transparency, they have more places to buy. And for you as a B2B seller, you have to acknowledge this, right? Okay, so what does this raise? All kinds of channel conflict concerns, right? So that's what we're here to talk about today. Go ahead to the next slide, Tom. So what is channel conflict, right? This is a definition from the source of all authority, Wikipedia, but I like it. It's in my book. Channel conflict occurs when manufacturers, brands, disintermediate their channel partners, such as distributors, retailers, dealers, and sales representatives by making their products or selling their products directly to buyers through general marketing methods and or over the internet, right? So it essentially it speaks to the slide I just shared. In this world, we have manufacturers becoming distributors and retailers. We have retailers and distributors and retailers becoming manufacturers. This channel conflict is sort of going all different kinds of ways these days, and we have to acknowledge ultimately that ultimate buyer, the person at the end of the chain, is in charge, and we have to understand their needs, their journey. So this can be both external, as I'm describing here, but it can also be internal. And Justin's going to share some great stuff in a little bit about how, if you think about your traditional selling channels, like your sales team, well, is e-commerce a threat? Is it going to take all my business away? My relationship is gone? Well, no, this isn't Death of a Salesman. Thank you, Andy Hoare, for that a few years ago, from Forrester. But this is actually an evolution of channels, but you've got to understand that it's both internal and external. And as a manufacturer, you have many channels: direct e-commerce, traditional resellers, value-added resellers or VARs, dealers, etc., Amazon. How do when these channels are competing for the same customers' dollars, you've got this conflict that arises. It's often centered on price, but it's also importantly not just price, it's also about control of the relationship, which is the other aspect I like to think about. So go ahead to the next slide, Tom. So if it's not managed carefully, channel conflict can cause your e-commerce effort to fail. I've seen this too many times where ill-conceived attempts to avoid channel conflict end up preventing all adoption of e-commerce to begin with, and you may as well not have started. So you've got to think about these things, right? So number one of the key mistakes I see is, well, the sales team doesn't really need to be involved. This is e-commerce. This is a different channel. And what you end up with is misaligned channels. You got the sales team fighting against e-commerce. If your sales team is not involved, don't even start. Get them involved, and then begin the process. And Justin, you'll speak to this. Pricing inconsistency between channels, right? So I'm on my e-com site. Look at that. Oh, wait, here's the product. Wait a minute. That's 50% higher than I'm used to paying, or I should be paying. Your buyer is not going to adopt e-commerce if your pricing's not aligned, right? So Justin will talk about that too, and Tom too. Limiting online assortment. Well, okay, I have this, I want to offer 5 products out of my 5,000 on my e-commerce site to avoid channel conflict. Well, your customer is not thinking about you in a silo, and you in e-commerce is separate from what they get from the sales team or other channels. You need to be smart about your assortment strategy. If you fail to meet their expectations, guess what? They go elsewhere. Why do you think that Amazon is getting so much volume in B2B? I'll talk about that later. Why do you think other distributors and other manufacturers are gaining market shares? Because they're meeting this expectation. And if you're not on the marketplace, in particular Amazon, you're not staying in front of the customer. I have this great exercise I do with CEOs of companies, manufacturers, where we'll go on Amazon and we'll pull up, we'll do a search for their product type, not their brand, their type, and all these products will show up, right? That are being sold by companies they've never heard of. Then we'll run the numbers and look at how much revenue. Oh my gosh, that's a $4 or $5 million product that's selling on Amazon. I never even heard of this brand. So if you're not in front of the customer with these where they're buying, you're giving up revenue, and you're giving up revenue to companies you never even heard of. The entire competitive landscape is changing, and you don't even know it. So these are some of the things that lead to or result from channel conflict management efforts. So go ahead. So Tom, let's take a pause here. So in a world where buyers are in charge, how do you, a manufacturer, meet their needs while also respecting traditional channels? Look, we don't want to belittle the fact that you may have 50% of your revenue coming from distributors or dealers or resellers, whatever you call them, retailers. You have to acknowledge that this is a real thing and plan for it. So I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Justin to give you some tactics to think about here. So Justin, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Brian. And to answer your question, how do they deal with that? I would say very delicately. It is a really delicate type of a situation, because as we'll kind of talk through here, there's channel conflict externally, but there's also channel conflict internally with your sales team and your CSR associates as well. So not only do you have to manage and mitigate your employees, but you also have to make sure that your distribution partners are happy as well. And they're not going to say, well, you guys are going right around me in direct, I'm not going to buy from you anymore. So when you start to compile all of that together, it can get super complex, and you really need a solid game plan to kind of approach that. And that's a little bit of what we're going to kind of talk about here today, are some quick things that we can give to you that might be things that you can leave here today and say, all right, how can I implement this within my business today? Or, oh, I didn't think about that, but you know what? It makes sense if we bring a team together to talk about it. So Tom, if you want to jump to the next slide here. we'll kind of dive into each of these topics, and we're going to kind of expand further. Just wanted to give an overview on this slide of the two types of channel conflict that Brian was alluding to. So we have the internal, which essentially could be between your sales team, your CSRs, other employees, where again, we want to stand up a new e-commerce website. I mean, what's also going to get stood up at that point? Your salespeople's resumes, right? They're going to update them and be like, "Holy crap, I'm gonna lose my job because this website's going to replace me." Not the case. And we'll talk through some of that. But these are some 4 key pillars that you can look at with your employees to really try to mitigate some of that. Voice of the employee is very important. And we're going to talk later about how to bring them into part of the process, and being, which the second bullet here shows, is transparent with them from the beginning on what exactly you're potentially looking to implement if it's an e-commerce website. And also training and enabling these CSR sales folks to be advocates of the platform and super users, right? Because that's going to transcend down to their customers. And then again, if you are implementing a new commerce website or even enhancing the one that you have, making sure that the compensation plan for the sales folks is in line with what is there today, right? We don't want to de-incentivize someone from telling a customer to use a website because they're not going to make their commission. So we'll talk through some of those pieces. Externally, which Brian was just alluding to as well, again, your customers, whether that's your distribution partners or potentially the retailers or other folks further down in the chain, how do you make sure that you're mitigating that conflict as well and putting together strategic pricing? Pricing in and of itself could be an entire presentation. How do you price for a distributor A versus distributor B, versus if you do have a direct channel where you're going around distribution to a retailer, what does that pricing strategy look like? Are you implementing map pricing? Providing paths to the distribution partners that you have, right? We don't want to cut them out of the equation. If we have customers that are looking to buy through distribution partners, let's make it easy on our commerce platform to get to their site and place an order. And then also we want to enable partners with updated product information as well too, which is something that's a big challenge, I think, throughout supply chain, where I'm a manufacturer and I have my distribution partners out there, and maybe 40% of them are doing a good job actually uploading information to that distribution website, but maybe the other 60% aren't. So how do we tackle that and make sure that we have a product information PIM in place to manage some of that, and how can we do that within some of the platform capabilities? So we'll
Hey,
kind of
Justin,
dive. Yeah, go for it.
I was going to add something to that, which is that's a great point, the one you just made. And when I did my virtual book tour, I had Georgia Pacific as a guest on that tour. And one of the things the fellow at Georgia Pacific pointed out was it was exactly what you're just talking about. It was the product information, but even beyond that, it was the analytics they would provide. Now they're selling direct, right? In some cases on some products to the end buyer, but they're then able to talk to the channel about what what products are doing best, what some data is around sell-throughs and views, and where the customers are interested, what they're interested in, and how they might buy products together. So it's enabling the channel to do better on their own e-commerce operations. So that's a great point. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, thanks for that, Brian. I think Tom is going to touch on PIM a little bit later as well with product information and how Znode can kind of play there. But that's a great point, right? You not only want to give your customers the right product information, but the data and analytics to allow them to serve the customers further down in the chain better. So great call out. Tom, you can jump to the next one. So when we're talking about enabling channels in commerce and looking at whether it's the end user consumer or buyer or your customer, looking internally, there's different channels that people could potentially buy and order through. So, traditionally sales folks in manufacturing B2B might have placed orders through email or phone. Well, now that commerce has come into play, and specifically with COVID-19 accelerating things this year, the web or SMS or mobile might be more in the forefront. So how do we enable those channels in e-commerce through the different employees that we have for our customers to be successful? So Tom, if you jump to the next one, we'll look at ways to enable that internally and also deal with some of that conflict that might come up. So for the CSR folks that you might have within your organization, looking at finding ways to enable technology to allow them to really do their job better. Again, this goes to what we'll talk about at sales at the last point here, but making it easier for CSRs to track issues as they come in for the different channels, if you're servicing different channels, will not only make their life easier, but it will create a repository of things that your CSRs can look back at in the future and say, oh, for this type of channel partner, we had this issue in the past. Or if you're going direct, here are some things that typically come up. And you can track those issues as they do occur and refer to them in the future. Access to product information and content. We just talked about that, and Brian brought up some good points around, giving your customers data and analytics around that. So can you share information around product information and content through your CSRs to the customers that you have? And then the last point here around customer and persona specific breakout ties into the first bullet point, but even a little bit further. Within each of the different channels you might serve, you might have different personas. So that's really taking it a step further down the rabbit hole, saying, okay, I'm servicing a hospital. Within that hospital, in that channel, I have people who have clinical personas and I have people who have business background personas. How do I potentially break out different pieces of questions or information, not only for that channel, but for those users as well to address that? And that will make CSR's lives easier. It'll also make you more sticky with your customer. If we jump into marketing here, the next one here, again, you're going to see product information and content distribution be a pretty consistent theme across all of these. So I'll jump over that one because I think we know what that is. But the key messaging and positioning strategy and having that articulated to your employees is key. I'll give you a perfect case in point. CSR gets a call from a customer and says, I just saw that you guys have a direct-to-consumer website. What's this all about? If the CSR doesn't have the correct positioning strategy, you're not really going to know how to answer that, and you might lose that customer. So having marketing think about those things and put those plans together to not only address those questions and be transparent, but also ease customers' concerns and provide an open line for communication is huge. And then again, DAM and PIM enablement. So we talked about PIM and product information, but what about the digital asset management as well? So all the digital assets that are out there, do your CSRs and sales have access to those to articulate them back to customers? Then the last piece here, which is probably the biggest elephant in the room, is sales. And the sales team, again, could see this if you're looking to implement a new e-commerce site, if you're looking to potentially go around a channel that you have internally where some of your sales folks might also see that as a threat because, hey, my customer is a distributor, you're looking to go around them to the retailer, that hurts my relationship. So how do we handle that internally? So definitely providing ease of access to selling documents and content, which ties into the key messaging that marketing will set, will be key. Having CRM and sales activity visibility as well is something that sales management can look at and see what type of conversations that customers are having with their sales folks. I'm seeing within the CRM that there's kind of a lot of reoccurring backlash against this new channel that we might have opened up. And then the last piece here, which really is going to help the sales team potentially either sell this new channel or sell the new commerce instance that you're looking to go at, is what Brian alluded to, is moving sales folks from the idea of order takers. Hey, Mr. Salesperson, I need to place this order, to order creators, where someone's saying, hey, Justin, you're one of our greatest customers. I noticed that based upon your buying patterns that you're similar to another customer group we have, and you're missing out on some really key deals and key products that might help your business. And that ties into the next slide, Tom, if you want to jump into, which is, what does this traditionally look like, right? All of us on the phone here, if we're in a manufacturing company, and I've used this slide before in other instances because it articulates it so well, that traditionally everything has been so reactive. A customer has a problem, they pick up the phone, they call a salesperson, they say, listen, my warranty ran out on this product, I need to order it again, I need a replacement part for this product, it broke. And the salespeople are really just taking that order, or maybe they're cold calling accounts that they haven't dealt with in a few years. That's what's been traditional. But because of everything that's happened, not only this year, but in the last few years, as commerce has accelerated, salespeople are really shifting to order creators, which is the next slide here. And order creators are proactive. They're using data, they're using analytics, they're using CRM tools to be able to predict what customers might need and promote the customer self-service, which to a salesperson says, you're just replacing me. That's not the case. I don't want to replace you. I want to free you up to grow the account. Let the website take the orders. If someone needs to place an order, let's the CSR reps take that order based upon the information that they have. Let's give you, the salesperson, data and analytics to be predictive enough to know when a customer need is going to happen before it happens and exceed those customers' expectations. And I'll talk through a use case here that we had at Geriatric Medical where we did this exact thing and show some of the results.
Hey, Justin, it's
Justin, if I
interesting.
could-
Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, Brian. I was going to say if I could jump in. There's a book called The Challenger Sale, which talks about order creators, and it actually covers a great case study on a large distributor that moved to pushing all the orders online, and their salespeople, it's actually Granger, their salespeople actually becoming consultants with the customer and how successful they were. I believe one of the key things is also having e-commerce analytics pulled into there, not just the traditional CRM, but what are the customers ordering and what aren't they ordering, so that you can help them build a bigger assortment of things to buy.
And Granger is getting something like 60+%, I think, now of their revenue from e-commerce. Justin, it's these are good. This is great, a great point, and a really important one to managing this internal, channel conflict. Justin, I'm just to put an interesting point or tell a quick story. I'm a student of Amazon, obviously. One of the things that Amazon's working on is predictive ordering. So things that, and in fact, I think they have a patent on it, which is predicting what you as a buyer, whether you're a consumer or a business buyer, are going to order before you order it, and it's showing up for, or at least be waiting for you in the local distribution center, kind of the advanced team of your orders waiting for you to order them. So there's this whole science around this, and of course, as with many things, Amazon's investing heavily into it. So just wanted to point that out. This is not science fiction. This is really happening.
Absolutely. And, if Amazon's doing it, you can only imagine what else they're working on that we don't know about, right? So,
right.
yeah, all valid points. Tom, you can jump to the next. Yeah. So again, I included a case study here because before joining Perficient, I was at Geriatric Medical where I was director of e-commerce for 6 years. And we did a lot of really cool things there. And, one of the things that is really applicable to this conversation is really how, when I was hired in, the CEO said, our website stinks. Our customers are telling us if we don't change it, that they're going to leave and go elsewhere. Help us fix it. So on paper, I mean, hypothetically, that's easy, right? I mean, it's challenging to put all the pieces together, but that's one problem. The other problem that comes up is the employees as well, because again, they've used to a website or a commerce platform that's been there for the last 10 years. And now this new shiny toys coming in that they see as a threat to them. Oh my goodness, like this site's going to take more orders. What am I going to do? And this is the exact formula that we use at Geriatric, which we call the TCT. But essentially what it is it's working with the sales and CSR team from the beginning of the process, making them a part of the process, which is the first point here, being transparent, being open and honest about the project scope. This website, it's coming, but it's not replacing you. In fact, we're hiring more people. Insights and goals and expectations. We expect you to be a super user of this new tool in your tool bag. Here's how we're going to get you there by training, collaboration, etc. Looking at the customer and persona specific breakout as well. So again, we're being transparent with you, saying, we know you have to deal with different channels and different customers. Let the website deal with positioning content based upon that, and you just focus on the relationship, which tees into the collaboration. Okay, you have the relationship. Tell us what features your customers are telling you and screaming, saying, your website doesn't do this today, but if it did, I would use it more, which tees into the voice of the customer. How can we capture key pieces of information continuously throughout the process? And then giving the sales team a new thing to sell. I always say it's a new tool in their tool bag, but it isn't a shiny new toy, and it's something new for them to talk about, which tees into the training. Being knowledgeable leaders on the website, creative ways to solve customer issues with technology, and continuous new feature and onboarding. And that's what we told our salespeople is when you're out there with customers and they're saying, I'm on your site, but it's a little challenging because I'm trying to do X, Y, Z, and I'm trying to buy from multiple different ship tos, and it's a pain in the neck in the checkout process. We want to hear that feedback. And when we implemented this model, we had great results because our salespeople went from being, I don't like this, to, oh, this is great. This is going to free me up to grow the business and increase my commissions. And we saw tremendous growth because of this. And Tom, if you jump to the next, this is exactly what we did. So we were able to achieve 82% of revenue through digital in the first 4 years that we launched this new commerce platform. We obviously iterated on it, but I mean that's fantastic, right? That's 4/5 of our business going digitally, which means only 18% are going through email or through phone. So a great statistic. Even more great is a 50% reduction in CSR and sales orders since the site went live. We're able to shift that to commerce, freeing up the salespeople to have more time. And then 1% cart reduction rate as well, which or abandoned cart rate. Essentially, 99% of carts actually converted, which seems crazy, but the analytics don't lie there. So just an interesting use case.
Amazing stats.
And I'll touch quickly here on some of the external pieces and then tee it up to Tom to close this out. But, we talked about internally, but let's shift to externally. So you're a manufacturer, you have your distribution partners, those distributors have their retailers or whatever businesses are left in the chain or next in the chain. And then you have the consumers or potentially the users of the product. So when we're looking to mitigate some of this in the distribution chain, how do we do that? Well, again, giving clear and cut access to the distributors to the product information and content is key, because I can't tell you how many manufacturers I've worked with in the past that have fantastic content and have fantastic ways to get it, but just as many of people out there who have it great don't have it great as well. And when you're a manufacturer and you make it challenging for folks to leverage the content downstream in the channel, it's going to affect the revenue and sales numbers. Selling content and sales support outside of the products as well. How can we back up the products that we're selling by creating videos, images, webinars, blogs, you name it, providing that additional sales support. Then also looking at cooperative marketing programs. I've worked with many manufacturers in the past that see value in this, where you're working with your distribution partners and saying, listen, we're not trying to go around you. We want to work with you. And here's how we're going to do that. We're going to pay you to promote our products through the distribution commerce site you have or the channels. We're also might even, provide you a VIC or an incentive program where if you grow above a certain threshold, we're going to give you a rebate. These are ways that you can look at as trying to mitigate some channel conflict depending upon if you're looking to navigate around some of these channels. So we'll talk to that in a second. Some of the retailer stuff is, again, downstream, providing your distributors the opportunity to provide their customers end caps, marketing material, employee training content, and a pricing strategy too, right? So Mr. Distributor, here's what your price is, and here's what your MSRPs should be for your retailers. We've done some research. We found that this is going to help them sell more products. And again, if you're looking to really go down that direct to consumer path or direct to buyer path, providing open lines to customer support is probably the biggest key here. Is people who have questions that are further down in the channel may not be the typical questions that you're used to seeing. So having a game plan for that and instructional content for the actual users of the product could be beneficial as well. Tom, you can jump to the next. So this brings me to the last piece here in this, which is I'm sure some things that folks on the line are thinking about, which is you can see the scissors here right in the middle. I'm a manufacturer. My distribution partners maybe aren't getting it done. I want to go around them and go directly to the buyer, to the consumer. What does that look like? What should I think about? And where should I not step on any landmines? And I can tell you this is a slippery slope. There's no perfect answer. The best way that I would describe it is that it depends on your business. Depends on your customers. It depends on your sales team. Every situation's different, but there are some general themes to think about. And if you jump to the next, Tom, I'll talk through some of these. So, from a branding and positioning standpoint, you can definitely create a new private label brand. And I'm sure that's no surprise to folks here. And with that, creating that house brand would give you the ability to go around a channel and sell something that they may not know about. But to the second bullet point here, I'd caution you, because people always tend to find out. And transparency with current customers is key. Again, that might be the core of your business. If you're looking to create a new private label to go around them, probably a good idea to maybe keep them in the loop depending upon your business and say, listen, we've launched some new products and we're going to try them out in a different brand. It's not going to compete with the other brands that we have today.
Hey, Justin, if I could chime in there real quick, one thing I see also happening is distributors are either buying suppliers or creating their own private label products. So look, listen, manufacturers, your channels are doing the same things and thinking about this just like you are. How do I maintain control of this in this new world? And so, just be aware of that. Understand what your distributors and resellers are doing themselves to manage this. And you can, just talk to them about it. The transparency thing, Justin, I think is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, again, we're all people, right? So have conversations, be open and transparent. And to be honest with you, out of those conversations, who knows what could come about? A distributor could say, you know what, we thought about creating our own as well. Let's collaborate on something. You never know what could happen. And that tees into the product piece as well. So again, leveraging MAP pricing, manufacturing advertised price, and maintaining that across all channels and enforcing it is super, super important. Again, if you're setting a MAP price at $4.99 and someone's violating that by selling it through Amazon or a different channel, you got to slap them on the hand and say, you can't do that, or we're not going to sell to you anymore. Because once that pricing strategy or that pricing model is compromised, it deteriorates the brand and also expectations. Look to offer unique specialized products in private label ways as well. So create a new item that maybe makes sense for the market, but you want to try it out on your own first and go down that path and say, listen, Mr. Distributor, we're creating a new model here. We want to try it out. It's not ready for prime time yet, so we're going to try it in a new channel and see how it goes. To a point I talked about earlier, allow customers to buy in store and from your partners. If someone's going to your site and maybe you have guest checkout of enabled and you can do that, great. But sometimes people might want to buy from your distribution partners. So make it easy for them to do that. If you're setting up a new direct to consumer or direct to buyer website or commerce platform, articulate that back to your core that yes, we might have this, but we also built a new feature through our commerce platform that makes it easier for customers to find you, Mr. Distributor or Mrs. Distributor, to buy bulk product. And then the last piece here is leverage the right technology. Leverage multi-brand, multi-store e-commerce technology that's going to make it seamless for you to turn out potentially multiple storefronts for these different brands that you might be looking to release. Look to create different experiences by the personas that are there and have that flexibility to try new concepts and scale business as needed. Maybe you launch a new product and maybe it takes off. You're going to want to leverage a platform that can scale as your new business potentially scales. And Tom, I'll kind of kick this over to you here to talk maybe a little bit about how Znode fits in well for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Brian. So, I mean, I look at it like welcome to the new normal, right? Thanks 2020. It's one of those years. So suddenly we're in a global pandemic. Our customer behavior is changing. Employee expectations are changing. Channel expectations are changing. Like it's bad enough the way it is, right? And now suddenly you have to think, oh my gosh, and now I have to choose the right technology strategy and the right platform. And maybe there's all kinds of nuances to that to make sure that 2021 doesn't look like 2020. We can't control the pandemic, but we can certainly control our business. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the needs of manufacturers when it comes to their e-commerce ecosystem and how that aligns back to a lot of the things that Brian and Justin talked about, particularly about, voice of employee, what it means operationally. And when you think about what is the e-commerce landscape for manufacturers, it really depends because manufacturing is a very big sector. There are branded manufacturers that create products that sell through retail that maybe they want to sell direct. There's industrial manufacturers that typically sell through distributors. But I look at it, there's three different layers of e-commerce for most manufacturers. One is the direct to consumer. And that's where you have basically MSRP pricing. Typically, it's a single catalog to single store, and it's largely about new customer acquisition. You've got B2B, where you have things like account-specific pricing, customer-specific catalogs. vertical specific catalogs and solutions. So based upon a login, you may serve up a specific catalog to a specific customer or profile. And then these are largely set up for channel and key account support. And then you have this other area that I would say is a little bit more complex, which is the B to B to X model. And that is the ability for a manufacturer to stand up a store on behalf of their channels. And this does really help with avoiding channel conflict because you're empowering your smaller channels that may not be able to have their own well-done e-commerce experience. It's also very popular with wholesale distributors, and it's also good for wholesale support. And even sometimes like major accounts, like having a specific experience for a major account that buys a lot from you. And this B to B to X landscape or possibility with e-commerce is very popular in certain industries. It's very common in electronics. It's very common in uniform distribution, uniform manufacturing distribution, promotional products, but it is becoming more and more common in general with manufacturers because most manufacturers kind of live, I wouldn't say in the 80-20 rule, but in the 70-30 rule. 70% of their revenue comes from a couple of major channel partners, but 30% comes from mom and pop, very close to the end customer distributors that can't afford their own e-commerce. So this creates a unique situation. Like, how do you solve for all of this, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the pains that we see in the market when we're talking with customers and prospects. And you can see the headline here is it's technology silos or unnatural acts. And there's really two ways to solve for this traditionally. Traditionally, you'll see that a manufacturer will have a specific division that goes and buys a D2C or a traditional platform like a D2C platform. You may have sales running with a B2B platform, and now sales has a head of channel who wants to run that kind of B2B to B platform. And what typically happens is they're looking at 3 different platforms. They don't have one requirement list for the entire enterprise. They have 3 different requirement lists and 3 different buying groups doing this. Or they do have one platform, but the platform largely was a B2C platform that is largely being customized, and it's doing, this is a term in technology, some people have coined this, unnatural acts. You take a traditional platform and you customize it so much that it becomes very expensive, needs a lot of support because it wasn't originally meant to do that. One of the other big issues you have is data silos. So as you're running multiple platforms, or if you're running one platform, but you have to replicate data for different stores, you also have to manage data across 3 or 4 different platforms, 3 or 4 different databases. These all have to integrate into your ERP. So things start to get pretty complex on the technology side. And of course, Justin, you talked about voice of employee and really getting your employees involved. Things start to get pretty messy when you're managing silos as well, because now you look at your customer service reps. You have to think about they need to be trained across 3 different silos. They have to log into 3 different backend admins, or maybe you have 3 different customer service rep teams. Suddenly that starts to get expensive. You start to look at your IT and your e-com and / marketing teams, and you divide them into silos. I don't know too many companies that think silos are a good thing, right? But things start to get more and more complex when it comes to getting your employees involved and keeping your employees happy and part of this process. And eventually it becomes a hot mess, because when you think about it, it's not like you just have a B2C website, if that is one of your channels, or a B2B or a B2B to X. Often if you're going through mergers and acquisition and you're bringing on new brands, you might have to stand up another site. If you're trying out a new brand and you're just creating a brand with a pop-up site and you're starting to do some testing, you're standing up another platform. I see this a lot. I mean, literally this week I was on a couple phone calls with some companies, one which is a branded manufacturer, and they're actually private label. And so they sell to retailers. And they also have the right in their private label contracts to sell direct as well. And they manufacture 22 different brands. They are buying a B2C platform, and they're going to stand it up 22 different times and manage 22 different instances of that platform in order to go to market selling direct. I also talked with a pretty large global manufacturer that has 3 different B2B sites, and they all have their own backend admin, they all have their own product information, and they have one central product information management tool. However, it doesn't integrate well, and once they get the information into those 3 platforms, they still have to manage that information across 3 different places. So these things really, really do start to be complex over time. And that leads back to like, the voice of the customer. And by the way, it's you in the voice of your employee, but you also have that voice of the C-suite, right? And typically what we see is that the C-suite is walking around doing one of 2 things. They either have a big smile on their face saying, man, are we investing heavily in digital transformation? Or they're walking around with a big frown on their face saying, man, are we investing heavily in digital transformation? Because they just aren't finding the efficiencies in how the actual enterprise is set up. So one of the things that we're working with manufacturers at Znode with our platform, which is really made for the complex needs of manufacturers, is solving for some of these problems. So one of the things is centralizing product information and making it easy to manage in one place. And I'll talk a little bit about the architecture of Znode and how that matters. The ability to easily create and manage catalogs. So the ability to stand up catalogs for vertical markets, customer specific catalogs, without having to replicate data, as I showed in the previous slide, across silos. And then to even be able to manage specific stores and run multi-store, but you could have one store that has a B2C theme with B2C rules and specific SEO, and you could have a completely different B2B site with its own specific rules, SEO, theme, etc., and even B2B to B sites that are all managed out of one platform, but easily controlled with a lower total cost of ownership. Also solving for that single admin, single training need for the customer service reps to centralize and basically be able to go into one admin, sort by store and customer, and quickly manage. So it does reduce the amount of silos, and even to be able to impersonate a customer and take orders online on behalf of that customer.
Hey, Tom, one thing I wanted to just chime in there, that tying it back to channel conflict management, by having the ability to address the needs of specific personas and customer types, that's one way you can help to manage and mitigate, as Justin was saying, this the potential for conflict. So that's good. I just wanted to point that out. That's also, directly tied to what we're trying to communicate here today.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets back to Justin's point about serving specific content and products to specific personas and speaking to them. It also speaks to that internal struggle with how do you get the employees on board and able to do this in an efficient way. And one thing that the IT leader typically likes about this is it's one technology stack. Because again, they're not hiring 3 different teams across 3 different platforms. It's one ERP integration, assuming that a major manufacturer only has one ERP. And then of course, the executives certainly like the total cost of ownership. It does support agile business models and M&A activity. But also, Justin talked a lot about the order makers versus the order takers. There is some additional functionality in there to allow for not only taking the product information and syndicating it out to channels to support channels, but also the ability to have a sales portal for those salespeople to manage their channels, their direct customers, and they can log in and see their specific accounts only and see that data. And not just CRM data, which is different, which is more about sales activity. This is about customer buying activity. It's the ability to recognize what the customer is buying and what they're not buying, help them build better assortments, consult with them. We talked about the Granger example, and really consult with the customer on what they should be buying. And again, whether that's through offering discounts, consultation, whatever it is, but owning more of that share of that customer. So what we're working with manufacturers now with the platform is really that ability to manage these different multi-channel approaches to e-commerce, whether it's B2C with its own unique look and feel, whether it's B2B and distributor portals and serving channels, or whether it's B2B to X, which is largely helping wholesalers, dealers with their own e-commerce if they're not big enough, and even international, because let's face it, if you're a manufacturer and you're going to stand up e-commerce, you might as well start to be found globally, set up more and more channels internationally. So setting up a specific catalog and store for Europe with specific languages and themes, very easy to do. And so getting back to that, like trying to avoid 2021 looking like 2020, we often get asked a lot of advice, and I put a couple takeaways here, but one of the things that I would recommend is there's a lot of noise in the market right now with e-commerce. There's a lot of platforms. There's a lot of analyst reports. There's a lot going on with e-commerce right now. And so I would say avoid the noise in the marketplace and really be diligent. Really be diligent when it comes to looking at a platform. Take the time to document your enterprise requirements and your enterprise plan versus a siloed set of requirements and a siloed plan. I would also say look at ways of managing the technology stack. Look at ways of minimizing the technology stack and really managing your total cost of ownership. And then finally, look for something that's more unified, because it gets back to everything you said, Justin, about your internal teams and the ability to manage data easily when looking at multi-channel e-commerce, which is if you have a unified platform, you can have unified data, including your salespeople have a unified view of that data when they're working with their channels. Your internal teams will be much happier. Your channels obviously will be supported better, and you'll have a unified enterprise. So there's a lot more than just technology at the root of this, but it is powered with the right technology choice.
So Tom, thanks for that. And one of the things, and we've got about 4 minutes left here, so I'll go quickly through this. And by the way, if you want to email me, I can on any of these topics. Can we go through it really fast here? For those who are listening, it's just brian@enceiba.com. So if you're not staying in front of the customer though in this new world, how do you, you're potentially losing relevance. The example I gave early on in the webinar here. This is some statistics from Wonderman that show that 63% of shoppers are starting their search on Amazon, and this is happening in B2B categories as much as it is happening in other places. So you need to stay in front. And so our firm, what we do is we help companies make sure they approach this the right way. Go ahead to the next slide, Tom. I'm going to go fast through this. An Amazon strategy is a must, right? What we're seeing here is that more and more volume is shifting towards Amazon. Amazon business is now the fastest growing part of Amazon. What many people don't realize is that it's becoming a tremendous, really a distributor, the distributor of the future in a lot of ways. It's on track to be one of the largest industrial distributors, for example, in the world. And if your company differentiates on product, which is what a lot of manufacturers do, this is really a channel shift. And if you're doubling down on what you do best, remember the Bezos quote I gave earlier, which is product, then you're capitalizing on that shift, you're acknowledging it, but you want to control your brand and your price. And there's a couple ways to tackle it. I'll get to that in a second. Go ahead to the next slide, Tom. There's a bunch of key success factors. The first and foremost of this is you need the right selling strategy. So we help companies figure that out, right? What is the right way to go to market so you don't lose control with Amazon? Or if you're already on Amazon, how do you gain control back? It can be a challenge. So there's many of you have probably heard of Vendor Central. There's other approaches like Seller Central. I don't have a lot of time to go into these now, but the point is that you need a number of things to be successful. One is the right selling strategy. You need the right assortment strategy. Some of the things Justin was talking about also apply here specifically to Amazon. You don't have to put all of your product on Amazon. You can create parts of your assortment for it. You need great product content. You need, and this speaks to some of the stuff Tom was speaking about, being able to feed product content in. Leveraging Amazon Prime. Those of you who are Amazon Prime members, all of you raise your hand because it's 99% of you. You understand how you shop, right? Which is using Amazon Prime as your primary way to shop. You're filtering by that. So you to be successful here on Amazon need to have that mark, Amazon Prime. Search. Amazon is a search engine. It's getting 70% of product search. So this is as much about search engine optimization as anything else. Again, this is something we help our clients with. And resourcing, you do need the right resources for this to be successful. But we have clients with 15, 20, $25 million Amazon businesses, some cases more. And this isn't just for the big guys either. There's also small players that are building businesses in very viable channels here. But how do you control it? And if you go to the next slide, Tom, we're coming up on time. I just wanted to give you guys two quick paths. So the thing I hear most in working with B2B companies is, where's your channel conflict source? oftentimes it's Amazon. It is from selling products there, and 70% of manufacturers, by the way, don't know all the sellers selling their product on Amazon. 70%. So if you go on Amazon, search your brand, who are these people driving my price down, right? And maybe, hey, I'm giving Amazon control. Guess what? Amazon, if you're selling to them wholesale, they're going to be the lowest price in your product always. So there's two paths that exist for you to gain control. One is using a Seller Central account, different way to sell on Amazon. You control the price. The other thing is there's a playbook. Again, if you want to follow up with me, I'll send you some information on this, but it's called Reseller Enablement. And this allows you as a manufacturer to authorize specific distributors and dealers on Amazon, let them manage or win the sale, but you control the price, you control the buy box, the content, your brand positioning, etc. You need to have a foundation of control for this. So MAP agreements and distribution agreements, things Justin was talking about, are also important. But there is a path here to maintain control, to take advantage of Amazon's volume, while also, sort of controlling the chaos and not being one of those people who doesn't know who those resellers are. So in a nutshell, we covered a lot. So that's Amazon. We're up on time here. Here's some key takeaways. Don't want to reiterate this because you guys we've gone through a lot today. Obviously, we can provide you with a copy of this deck, and it is recorded. But if you go to the last slide, Tom, we don't have any time for questions, but want to make sure everyone has our contact information so that you can reach out to us. We can send you a copy of this, the recording, etc. Tom, anything you want to wrap us up with?
Yeah, so there was a question in Q&A. We will follow up directly on that question because we are out of time. We will follow up with a copy of the deck as well as a link to the recording. If you do have questions, again, reach out to all of us. This information will be provided in follow-up to the webinar. So again, thanks everybody for attending. We appreciate it. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Great job.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.